What is going on, everybody? Welcome into our next mock draft here on the channel. This is our first big mock draft here after free agency, after all of the dominoes have fallen here, or at least a lot of them. A ton of shakeup in the top 10, a ton of shakeup with team needs down the board, so should have some new picks here relative to recent mock drafts here. Just going to be a one-rounder here today. I know I announced on Twitter this was going to be a two-rounder. That was my plan, but we landed in from Mexico last night, and then I have a hard cut in about an hour. I got to get ready to head to a bachelor party this weekend. I know, poor me. It's been a good week, but we had a 2-hour delay getting through customs last night. That was the time I had allocated to get a good second-round mock in there. Maybe when we're driving to our spot this weekend, I'll be able to post a 2-round or a second-round mock draft, at least in text, in the comments. So you can look out for that. But just one round today. It's going to be a what I would do mock draft, trying to make the best decision for all 32 teams based on my own evaluations. We will have some trades here, and let's get into it. Please do hit that like button as we get started, and make sure you're subscribed for more mock drafts and plenty more positional rankings videos coming at you. But let's get into it. With the number 1 pick, Caleb Williams. Don't need to spend any time there, despite whatever narrative Dan Orlovsky is trying to push out on Twitter. It's Caleb at number 1. I think we know that. We can move forward here. But then things do get a lot more interesting at number 2. With Washington, at least interesting externally, because for me, it's Drake Maye, and we're going to take Drake Maye because this is a what I would do mock draft. I have a clear cut gap between Caleb down to Drake Maye, and then after Drake Maye, I have a gap down to the next quarterback. And that's plain and simple, but I will reiterate, I think the Commanders are also going to take Drake Maye. I'm sorry, do not buy that Jayden Daniels is in play for let alone the number 1 pick, which some ESPN people are pushing right now. But I just don't really think Washington has much to think about here at number 2. Look, we see these big draft media people get duped by NFL teams year after year after year. I have seen this now for 5 years, that there's a certain player that they get a little word of, and then they just jump that guy up the board when pretty much everybody that watches the film disagrees that that's what should happen. And with Maye, we lead up to Combine Week. He's QB2, and all reports are his interviews were like fantastic, arguably the best interviews out of any of the quarterbacks out there, that the league loves him. And then within a week, all these reports start coming out of literally bumfuck nowhere, like, oh, the league is lower on Drake Maye. Really? Or are the Patriots and the Vikings and potential trade-up teams trying to do any little thing they can to convince Washington to take Jayden Daniels so that he's there at number 3? That seems a lot more likely. Like, every single Patriots fan would be popping champagne if Washington took Jayden Daniels. So for me, it's Drake Maye at number 2, and it will be Drake Maye. I would be stunned if it's not. Then at number 3 for New England. Look, this is a fork in the road moment, right? This is really where the draft starts. They could sit here and take a quarterback at 3. They could trade down as we did in my last mock draft, or they could do what I'm going to do in this draft and just stay put and take the elite generational wide receiver prospect in Marvin Harrison Jr. This is kind of what it boils down to, and this is my take on this. I would rather have, say, Michael Penix plus Marvin Harrison in this offense than Jayden Daniels and this horrible cast of weaponry that New England has here. And I get you could draft a wide receiver in the second, but what it boils down to is I just don't think Jayden Daniels is the level of quarterback prospect that you have to take now when your team is in shambles. You have a new offensive coordinator coming in. Your offensive line is a disaster. Your receiver situation is a disaster. Well, not so much after taking Marvin Harrison, because Kendrick Bourne goes from being your 1 to your 2. Deuce Douglas goes from being a number 2 to being that, kind of manufactured touch slot guy. Hunter Henry doesn't have to be as big of a focal point. You bring in Antonio Gibson. Everybody slides into their natural role once you get that alpha guy in Marvin Harrison. And you don't have to take a quarterback this year either. They signed Jacoby Brissett, who I think is deserving of a starting quarterback job. I don't get why the league looked at what he did in Cleveland when he was a top 20 quarterback in the league and just wrote him off. I think that the Patriots are much better off taking the skill player or trading down here than forcing the fit with a quarterback and a team that's not ready. Then we got the Arizona Cardinals at number 4. Much less debate here. We're taking Malik Neighbors, who I have said is closer to Marvin Harrison than he is to Rome Odunze. We'll stand by that. But with Hollywood Brown officially leaving Arizona, with Rondale Moore even getting traded off to Atlanta, there's a huge need at wide receiver here. They're just going to sit here and take either Marvin or Neighbors, or maybe they're in love with Odunze, but either way, it's wide receiver for the Cardinals. Then at number 5, so the LA Chargers are picking here, but this is the most obvious trade down destination, in my opinion, for the Minnesota Vikings to come up here. So the Vikings announced to the world when they acquired the Texans' first round pick, they're getting aggressive. They're coming up for their guy in this draft. And I, they might be overpaying for a quarterback prospect that I generally wouldn't say is worth selling the farm for necessarily, but they do have 2 kind of higher upside options here, J.J. McCarthy and Jaden Daniels. And I do think the Vikings are in a really unique situation, unlike the Patriots and really most teams in the league where, look, man, this is a situation where you are setting your quarterback up for success, and it's why I think even Sam Darnold could look pretty good in this offense with all this weaponry, 2 premium tackles, and maybe even most importantly, an incredible offensive play caller in Kevin O'Connell. So they know that a young quarterback is gonna be in a good spot here. So we're gonna follow through with that plan with the Vikings. And for the Chargers, this makes a lot of sense. They have such a lack of depth. And the opportunity to get 2 premium first-round picks here in a trade down is a great deal for them. They're going to get the 11th pick, they're going to get the 23rd pick, and then they're going to get a 2026 second-round pick because the Vikings sent their second-rounder to the Texans next year. I would elect to rather get that second 2 years from now than to get a third-round pick next year, basically, of similar value picks there. So the Vikings are going to come up. Now, I don't know how popular this is going to be, but because we are following through with the Vikings plan and kind of thinking from their lens already, as they've, when they traded for that Texans pick, they announced to the world that they're coming up. So we're going to kind of follow through with their line of thinking and who I think they would take here. And even I think maybe who I would take, it's really close between Daniels and McCarthy for me. But if I have Kevin O'Connell in my ear telling me who he wants, I feel very confidently that guy is J.J. McCarthy. The main difference there is the scheme fit. J.J. McCarthy, for all of his flaws, he is a surgeon over the middle of the field, and that is the core element of the Vikings passing game. Play action, deep digs from Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson over the middle of the field. That's where Kevin O'Connell wants to attack. He comes from that Shanahan-McVay background that puts a premium on that. And that's my biggest knock on Jaden Daniels is the inconsistency, seeing and throwing to the middle of the field, firing those heaters in between tight coverage as well. I think McCarthy's much better at. Not to mention playing under center, trusting the offense, playing with your back turned to the defense. Also, he's younger, he's more moldable in theory than Daniels. And I also think a big aspect of what would sell you on Daniels is the ability to get him involved on the designed run game, where Kevin O'Connell isn't really going to do that, right? Like very similar to Kyle Shanahan, where he took Trey Lance thinking it was going to be fun and then went right back to Brock Purdy. I think that Kevin O'Connell would prefer a J.J. McCarthy in this situation. It's not like McCarthy can't improvise and can't run, but again, the elite running ability and scrambling ability of Daniels is the biggest sell on him. So I really think it's J.J. McCarthy for the Vikings, for better or worse, but if he's going to succeed in the league as this raw, moldable ball of clay, this is as good of a spot as any. He would sit for a year behind Sam Darnold. I actually would really like the fit for the Vikings. It's a lot to pay for a prospect that I am warming on, but it's just a lot for J.J. McCarthy based on what he's shown. Very much those Trey Lance vibes in that sense of really paying up for a guy that hasn't shown too much. But I will reiterate, I think he is their guy in Minnesota. But we're not going to have to wait too much longer to take Jaden Daniels off the board, because the New York Giants, I am going to take Jaden Daniels for them. And this is a great fit for him. Ultimately, I think both these quarterbacks are going to the right spots for them to succeed at the next level. And for the Giants, I wanted to see how free agency played out, because, that offensive line was such a disaster last year, but I really like the stuff they did this offseason to improve that O-line. I'm much more optimistic about that group. They bring in Carmen Brasillo, who is one of the best O-line coaches in the league. They signed John Runyon, who's one of the best pass-protecting guards in the league. And then they go and get Jermaine Illuminor, who's a super underrated player, following Carmen Brasillo over, is insurance for Evan Neal. So I think the idea of taking Alter Fashanu here isn't a requirement for them. And this is a deep wide receiver class. They could go get some more weaponry later. But for Daniels, this is a great spot for him. Talk about a coach that has a track record of making the designed run game a part of his offense. We've seen that with Brian Daboll, right? With Josh Allen in Buffalo, and even with Daniel Jones in New York. So I think with Daniels, with Daboll, he's going to look at him and say, this is a much better fit. Also, Daboll's offense, not that he doesn't target the middle of the field, but it's not quite as dependent on that under center play action. Daboll's offense is much more of that spread him out style offense that Daniels will be more comfortable with. So I think from a scheme fit perspective, these two fits make a lot more sense. I think 6 for Daniels is a very comfortable spot in terms of how I have them graded out. And for the Giants, we're going to pull the trigger here at number 1. Then we got the Tennessee Titans. Not a lot of time to spend here. Joe Alt falls right in at left tackle. I think with the Vikings trading for that number 23 pick, you're ecstatic for the Titans, because you think they're going to come up, push a tackle down the board a little bit more. And Alt in that offense next to Peter Skoronski, when you just signed Cushenberry, they loaded up on receivers in free agency. You got the offensive coach. All of a sudden, I'm excited for the surrounding cast around Will Levis, which is really an impressive job by Tennessee after what it looked like there last year. Then we got the Atlanta Falcons at number 8, and the popular pick here is Dallas Turner. You look at that offense, edge rush is a huge need. They have really secured the offense through free agency. I do think this will be a defensive pick, but I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction here, and it's not going to be a surprise to those that watched my edge rushers rankings video last week. I'm going to take my number 1 edge rusher here, Laiatu Latu. And look, I get it. Dallas Turner, the thought process has been give Raheem Morris his moldable ball of clay to be a potentially elite edge rusher someday. I think Atlanta has announced they're going for it right now. They just signed a 36-year-old Kirk Cousins. They did sign a defensive head coach, which is a little bit more of a short-term play. You might lose Zach Robinson in a couple years and struggle to find a good offensive mind. I'm going to go with the more high floor, sort of lower upside player in Laiatu Latu. But it's not like he has some, low ceiling prospect either, right? I think Latu can be a number 1, and I think he can be that a lot quicker than Dallas Turner. I actually think they will prefer that when they're trying to win right now in this garbage-ass NFC South. So it's actually Laiatu Latu for me for the Falcons. Then the Bears at number 9. It's Rome Odunze still after the Keenan Allen trade. I know you could add a edge piece like Dallas Turner. I think that'd be a fantastic pick, but Keenan Allen is, to me, it's insurance in case Rome Odunze isn't there at number 9. But you're going to be in 11 personnel a lot, right? You're coming from Shane Waldron, Seattle Rams offense. Think of the 3 wide receiver packages that those offenses have ran through the McVay offenses. And then, of course, in Seattle last year when you had Metcalf, Lockett, and JSN, right? You're going to be in 11 personnel 73% of the time. And they don't really have a good number 3 wide receiver. So if Keenan's healthy, great. You have the best wide receiver core I think a number 1 pick has ever landed with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze. And I think I think Keenan Allen is a very reasonable-esque pro comp for Rome Odunze, who can be an inside-out receiver. And if Keenan Allen's hurt, he can play that role. And the long-term plan is Rome Odunze steps in to that role. So it's a pretty easy pick. I don't think Bears fans are really going to complain about that one, even if you could go Byron Murphy or a Dallas Turner here. All right, number 10, the New York Jets. I think this board has fallen really nicely for them. There's like 3 players that I'm totally happy with here, and they've really done a lot in free agency to look at that offensive line. It doesn't mean O-line's not in play for them at number 10, but with Tyron Smith, with Morgan Moses, they also brought in Simpson from Baltimore. It really opens up the opportunity to add another playmaker. Yes, they added Mike Williams. I don't think you count on him to be healthy. Dude, Brock Bowers in this offense is a fantastic fit. They do want to be still that Shanahan-style wide zone offense in a lot of ways, and Brock Bowers is the perfect fit there. But don't just look at him as a tight end either, right? He is exactly what they freaking thought they were getting in Allen Lazard, which if they watched the tape, they should have known that that's not what they're getting. But this is literally the Allen Lazard role, that big slot receiver that is going to play flexed in line, can down block on sweeps and wide zone, but get lost on play action, be a dynamic separator from the slot. He's just a much better version of that player. And a quick hitting option for them outside of Garrett Wilson. So you put him in the mix with Mike Williams on the outside, Garrett Wilson doing the number 1 wide receiver stuff. If this offensive line stays healthy, man, this is really shaping up to be a good fit for Brock Bowers here at number 10, who is one of the 10 best players in this draft. It's just a matter of finding the right kind of role and need fit. That's here with the Jets. But then for the Chargers at number 11, I know people are going to want, get Herbert all the help he needs. They do need a defense as well, and that roster it's beyond abysmal, right? Like, you got your 2 edge guys, that's great. You got Derwin James going to play the Kyle Hamilton role, you like that. Other than that, D-tackle, linebacker, corner, safety, it's a nightmare for the Chargers. And this is a very deep wide receiver class. You just picked up an extra pick, right? So not going to force a wide receiver fit quite yet. I'm going to take the best player on the board at a position of need. That is a very good draft strategy. Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas, I think is phenomenal. I think he is everything that this now Ravens defense inspired staff is going to look at what Justin Madubuike did for the Ravens last year. You can do literally all of the same stuff with Byron Murphy, a very similar skill set. I'm a huge fan of Byron Murphy. This is a very easy pick for me for the Chargers. Then we got the Denver Broncos at number 12. And Broncos fans, you know where this is going. I'm sorry. I know you want some exciting other fit here, but especially after free agency went, I just don't know what other direction you go other than taking Bo Nix in the first round. And I tried to trade down. I really did. But I went through it. I spent 10 minutes on my flight home. I tried to find the right team that also made sense for them, right? Because I'm not just picking for you. I'm picking for these other teams. And I'm not mortgaging a bunch of picks to come up when I like the way the board is going to play out for a lot of these teams. So I tried to find a trade partner. I really did. Because if I'm Denver, I'd love to move down to like 20 and then take Bo Nix, because it'd be just much more value, right? But if you can't do that, I'm totally fine just staying put here, taking Bo Nix at 12. Like, just to put this in perspective, I have the same overall grade on J.J. McCarthy as I do on Bo Nix. They're my QB 4A and 4B at this point, which is updated, by the way, from my QB rankings video in early February. I'm growing on McCarthy, but the Vikings mortgaged a first and a future second to go get McCarthy. If you're the Broncos here, I think you're getting a comparably good quarterback prospect for you. I really do like Bo Nix and how he fits Sean Payton's offense with his ability to kind of play on time and trust the system and all that, all those reasons we've talked about before. But you're not mortgaging the future for him. You get him for cheaper than the Vikings are going to have to pay McCarthy 7 picks later. And you now have the rest of the draft to fill out the rest of this team. So we are going to take Bo Nix again, Denver. maybe in the future with the board playing out differently, it'll make sense for a different team to trade up, but not this time. It's Bo Nix at 12. And then the Raiders at pick 13. In my very first mock draft, I gave them an offensive tackle, and Raiders fans were not happy about that, but since then, they have lost Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. They have much more major questions, and Carmen Bricillo is gone. So I do want to invest at offensive tackle. I think the defense is really shaping up in a good way, and I'm going to take actually a player that I'm much higher on than I thought I would be heading into this scouting process, and that's Amarius Mims, the tackle out of Georgia. And I do actually have a slightly higher grade on Olu Fashanu, the tackle out of Penn State, but you have your left tackle in place for the Raiders, and I think if you need a right tackle, it's close enough that I would take Amarius Mims over Fashanu. I also think Mims is just a better fit with Pierce, as they want to run the ball, play defense, and I think Mims is a much better run blocker than Olu Fashanu. So Mims is green. He hasn't played a lot, but he's not raw. He moves really well for a big guy. He's very good with his hands. I was just really impressed with how really kind of refined he was for a guy that is so young and just hasn't played so much. The 5-star tools with him are so obvious. I could see him going a lot higher than people realize. So I really like this pick for the Raiders with Mims. Just a kind of perfect fit there. Then we have at number 14, the New Orleans Saints. They're going to take Olu Fashanu, the left tackle out of Penn State. It just has not worked out with Trevor Penning. And with Fashanu starting to slide a little bit here, they need to protect Derek Carr, who doesn't have the best pocket presence. He doesn't have the best mobility. They really felt those issues on the left side of the line, and this would be a plug-in starter at left tackle. I mean, talk about refinement and pass protection technique. The questions with Fashanu are going to be kind of, overall athleticism and really just run blocking. Like, does he get off the ball? Does he have the play strength? It's like the opposite of what they were looking for in Trevor Penning. But let's move on to Indianapolis at number 15. I continue to love this fit for the Indianapolis Colts, and that is Brian Thomas Jr., the wide receiver out of LSU. I really do think for the Colts, they love athletic freaks, and it just doesn't get much freakier than Brian Thomas, who ran a 4.33 at 6'3", 208 pounds or whatever it is. But talk about the perfect role fit. We made this pick in our last mock draft, and I continue to like this because you got Pittman back now, you got Josh Downs. Everybody wants to put Brock Bowers there, and I get that, but Jelani Woods, when he's healthy, can play. You've got Kylan Granson. I don't think tight end is quite as big of a need as people say. They also like a Youngstown State kid they took a couple years ago that got hurt. Ogletree, right? Like, they have bodies, right? But what they don't really have is that deep threat for Anthony Richardson. Alec Pierce, heading into year 3, I'm treating what I get from him as house money. I'm not counting on him to play that role, but I really think in this offense, think about those go balls with A.J. Brown, with Hurts throwing them up to him. That can be Brian Thomas Jr. in this offense, and just the potential with the deep ball between him and Anthony Richardson is really exciting, and the playmakers there, this elevates everybody. So I'm just in love with this fit. I know Colts fans have said, I don't know if, the Colts will invest in wide receiver. Look, I think the Colts just want to take great young athletes and develop them. And I think that's what you're getting here in Brian Thomas. I know that's what you're getting there. All right, then we have the Seattle Seahawks at number 16. This is definitely a team I'm looking to trade down on. They don't have that second-round pick, right, from the Leonard Williams trade. John Schneider is a guy who's historically liked to trade down as well. So, with Seattle, I would love to get an interior offensive lineman. There's other needs as well, but, the way the board has fallen, it's, edge with like a Dallas Turner or cornerback. That's going to be the guys teams are trading up for. And if I'm Seattle, you've already invested so much at edge. I don't think another raw developmental guy like Miles Turner really makes a ton of sense there. And corner certainly doesn't make sense for them either. So if I can get a trade down for someone looking to move up for one of these premium players, I'm going to do it. I'm not going to move down too far, though. I'm going to move down to the 22nd pick with the Philadelphia Eagles, who are going to send their second round pick the 53rd pick, and we're going to give them the 81st pick back. So it's a second, third round pick swap. And they're also going to give us an extra 6th round pick for an extra dart throw. So we're going to move down to 22. The Eagles are going to come up and get their cornerback, get CB1, Quinyon Mitchell. What a pre-draft process he's had, just cementing everything by running that 4-3-3. But I mean, he can do everything for Vic Fangio, right? This gives him his Jalen Ramsey, really, role-wise. Like, you can have him follow number 1 wide receivers around. You can go zone, you can go man, you can do whatever you got to do with Quinyon Mitchell. He's fantastic. Then for the Jacksonville Jaguars at 17, it's going to be another cornerback off the board, Terrion Arnold. You know, that cornerback room has become their biggest need, and with the top 4 wide receivers off the board, I'm not going to go searching for a wide receiver with this pick. Unless you can go and flip this for Brandon Ayuk, which apparently they said no to, which, I don't know, I would probably do that. Brandon Ayuk guy is pretty damn good, but Terrion Arnold is as well. Really think it makes sense for the long-term plans of this team. He can be eventually maybe be a number 1 corner in this press man system, but for year 1, I think he could be a brilliant slot corner. His play style reminds me a lot of Kyler Gordon, who ended up, is now a good slot corner for the Bears. He's a higher upside, better overall player, Arnold is. But I do think in year 1, where you, at least for the time being, still have Campbell and Darby, right? Not Roby. Darby. I will never be able to get those two straight, but you got those two guys on the outside. You put Arnold into the slot right away. He's super physical, super instinctive there, and would complete that cornerback room. So I love that pick for Jacksonville. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals up at 18, and I really like how the Bengals have filled out their needs in free agency. They got Sheldon Rankins for DT2. They added Trent Brown to solidify the right tackle spot. So if I'm the Bengals, I think I'm looking at these wide receivers, but with how deep this class is, if I can move down and target one later, that's a really good strategy. Pick up more picks, fill out maybe the interior of the offensive line a little bit later. But man, if I can get some premium draft capital to move down, I'm going to do it for the Bengals. When you have Dallas Turner sitting there, still has not been taken, just with the way the board is fallen. We can't. That is the best asset that the Bengals have right now. Is Dallas Turner has fallen. I don't think they take him either, though, because they took Murphy last year. They have a good edge room. So we're going to field some phone calls. The team I'm going to move up with is the Arizona Cardinals. What a draft for the Cardinals. And they're going to give up the 27th pick, obviously, the third pick in the third round, which is almost a second round pick, the 66th pick in the draft, and a future fourth round pick to come up here for Dallas Turner. What a perfect fit for Gannon's defense, because Turner is such a hyper athlete. He's got wicked wingspan. Talk about a guy, in Gannon that wants those hybrid edge pieces, right? Guys that can drop into coverage, that can loop on blitzes. That is easily a way to manufacture some production for Dallas Turner, and eventually can be his Hassan Reddick, his Josh Sweat, if you will. But yeah, what a draft for the Cardinals. And then we'll see what the Bengals do in a minute. But at number 19, the Rams at number 19. God, this draft is so good. It really is, because I think Troy Fautanu last year could have been a top 10 pick, but he's still here in this scenario. For the Rams to get him at 19, I think is excellent value. And that offensive line all of a sudden is like, holy shit good. Seriously, you're keeping Stafford healthy. They're going to be able to run the ball. I love Fautanu in that system as a left tackle. You've signed 2 interior offensive linemen or brought in Jonah Jackson, obviously. Dotson got the big contract. He's back, and you're going to slide Avila into center. You still got Havenstein. Whoa, man, that offense is roaring, ready to go. Then we got the Pittsburgh Steelers at pick 20. This is going to be another offensive tackle off the board. It's going to be Talise Fuaga. We're going to move Braxton Jones over to left tackle, where he played at Georgia, and you now have cornerstone left tackle, right tackle pieces for your two new quarterbacks here. Really think Arthur Smith is going to value a run-blocking right tackle as well. There's a lot of similarities between Caleb and Gary, who he had in Atlanta, and Fuaga, where they're not the best athletes in the world, but their length and ability to just kind of maul dudes on those wide zone blocks seems like a really seamless fit for what Arthur Smith's going to want in that run game. And he's going to want a good O-line up there. So let's move on to another offensive line pick at number 21 for the Miami Dolphins. Robert Hunt gone. Connor Williams, maybe they'll be able to get him back, but he's gone at the moment. Armstead, another year older there. That offensive line is in shambles. And luckily for the Dolphins, the board, I think, is falling very nicely for them. And it probably will on draft day, where I think there are two really good first-round interior offensive line prospects, unless you're moving some of these tackles inside. But Graham Barton out of Duke and Jackson Powers-Johnson out of Oregon. Either of these guys would be great picks for Miami. I lean Graham Barton. I like his tape even a little bit more. I know Jackson Powers-Johnson's kind of the new toy, the hype guy, but I do lean Barton slightly. Again, either of those guys would be fantastic picks. And for Barton, I think he makes especially sense for Miami because he even could play tackle in the NFL. I really think that. I think he's athletic enough. He's technically sound enough. His arm length is 32 7/8 inches, which is under the threshold. I do think he projects better as a guard because he's just not quite as as broad. The amount of space he covers in his kick slides, his movement in general is very guardy, as opposed to, say, Troy Fautanu, who's very similar in size. Fautanu really glides in space. You don't really get that from Graham Barton, so that's why I think he is an interior player. But he also played center, I think, his freshman year, so he really could play anywhere on that O-line for Miami, which is exactly what they need. And I'm just... maybe early in the process, I was like, this is a little early for a guard. I would trade down, take him later. After watching Graham Barton, I don't know that you necessarily can trade down and get him later because we have Seattle back on the clock at number 22 after the trade down. I would have been thinking about one of these two pieces at 16. But we are going to take Jackson Powers-Johnson off the board. So back-to-back interior offensive line picks. That, as I explained, was kind of the process of the trade down, was the hopes that we could get one of those two players here at the top of the 20s. JPJ just steps immediately in as your starting center. Very self-explanatory. A huge need for them. Right now, they are slated to start either Olu Oluwatimi or Nick Harris from Cleveland. And if one of those guys looks great, fine, you can play JPJ at guard because right now your starting guards are Anthony Bradford and Tremaine Ankrum. It's the worst interior offensive line in the league, and I think there might be 3 tier gaps between them and the next team. So got to get an interior offensive lineman, I think. In the first round, I think you really want it to be one of those two guys, or taking like a Latham or a Fuaga and sliding them inside. And then for the Chargers at number 23, we've got our 5th straight offensive lineman off the board, J.C. Latham to the Chargers. I still think you can wait at wide receiver in this draft class. I don't think you can wait to get this type of piece for them. I mean, talk about the Chargers with Harbaugh coming in, wanting to run the ball, wanting to dictate things at the line of scrimmage. You've already added Byron Murphy. Everything they've done in free agency has been about physicality and toughness, and J.C. Latham fits that stylistically. I think it's an excellent value here. I mean, I'm not as high on J.C. Latham. I actually prefer him as a guard, which I think he might end up playing here. I'll talk about that in a second. But I think Lance Zierlein from NFL Network has Latham as like the 5th overall player and the number 1 tackle in this draft. I would say he's kind of crazy for that. I disagree with that, but there's a reason people like J.C. Latham. He is incredibly strong. He's physical in the run game. And again, here you're going to be able to kind of figure out what your best offensive line combination is on the right side with this new regime. Like, you have Trey Pipkins, adequate right tackle, but if you feel like Latham's good enough to just play there as he's practicing against Bosa and Mack and Tuipulotu every day, great, you can play him there. And then you have a competition at right guard between Pipkins and Salyer. But I actually like him better as the right guard here because I think Salyer showed last year. He's another example of one of these guys that we say, oh, he's undersized, he should be a guard, when I just think that's the wrong thinking. You actually need to be bigger and stronger to play interior offensive line, especially in a gap type of system like this, whereas Salyer looked great at tackle the year before. So then all of a sudden you've got Latham at guard, and then your tackle competition becomes between Trey Pipkins and Jamari Salyer. I think Salyer's a better player than Trey Pipkins, honestly. So that's... You're allowing yourself to have the best offensive line combination for the Chargers, and I really think this is in line with the personality that they're trying to instill in this team that could prove more valuable than anything. Like maybe this inspires an ounce of toughness out of Quentin Johnston, right? Don't forget him. So I know Chargers fans are just clamoring for wide receiver. You still got picks. You still got picks. Don't worry, this wide receiver class is remarkable, and the value of a Justin Herbert is he's able to lift guys up as well. So I know we're only doing round one here, but there are guys down the board that could definitely help you out at wide receiver. Then we have the Dallas Cowboys up at number 24, and honestly, for Dallas, they don't have a third-round pick, and they have major holes on this team, especially on the interior of the offensive line. But who are you taking at this point to be interior, right? The last 3 picks are kind of interior offensive linemen. I don't see that guy on the board right now. And I'm just going to be honest, I'm lower on Tyler Guyton. I'm going to get that out right now because I do think he's a player that they might like, and that a lot of people would be like, oh, just take Tyler Guyton. He's very much a type of developmental tackle prospect that they would like. I think this is too early for him. I think his tape is mediocre at best. So I just want to get that opinion out there. But I'm going to look to trade down if I'm Dallas, get some more picks. I think the players that I would be considering taking here are probably going to be in play a few picks later. And if you didn't hate the Cowboys before, you hate them even more now because they are giving the Boogeymen their pick of the litter at wide receiver. The Chiefs really, knowing they are probably going to go wide receiver at this point with that run of tackles. I know they signed Hollywood Brown, but I still think this is a great opportunity. You know, Hollywood Brown could go off this year and be someone they can't afford long term, but also there's an opportunity in this draft class to actually get a true, like, potential number 1 wide receiver. There's a receiver in this draft that I would be specifically in love with if I'm Kansas City, and that is Adonai Mitchell being such a dream fit within this offense and getting to develop with Patrick Mahomes in a situation where Kelsey's still there. You've got Rice, you have Hollywood Brown, again, at least for this year. Mitchell doesn't have to be the guy this year, but as Kelsey gets a year older, he's hosting game shows, he's dating Swift. How much longer is he going to keep playing? I don't know. And then if you lose Hollywood Brown, I think Mitchell long-term, this is the play. I don't think they can sit around and wait till 32 to get him, though. So we're going to move up. We're going to give, obviously, the 32nd pick. It's going to be a third-round pick, and then a 5th round pick swap. So the Cowboys are going to move up about 20 spots in the 5th round. So again, the Cowboys loading up on some meat in the middle of this draft, and the Chiefs paying up a little bit for a team that they're so deep right now, they don't need necessarily those mid-round picks. So I think a mutually beneficial trade, and God, Adonai Mitchell in a couple years could reach that CeeDee Lamb upside on this team. But then the Packers up at number 25. Cooper DeJean falling right into their laps. I mean, he just really is the perfect player for what the Packers need. And he's just probably the best player available at this point. So this couldn't have played out any better for Green Bay. You know, whether, and he could, I really do think he could start all 3 positions and would be fine doing so. Like, I think if Stokes is healthy and playing on the outside, I think Cooper DeJean's best position would be that big slot player. But I also think he can play safety for you next to Xavier McKinney. What a dream fit for Cooper DeJean to be there at 25 for them. Then we have the Tampa Bay Bucks at number 26, and this is where Jared Verse is going to come off the board. another situation where it's like, God, this draft class is just so good. Back-to-back picks of Cooper DeJean and Jared Verse, who easily would have been top 20 picks in last year's draft, but the Bucks are going to capitalize on that. They lose Shaq Barrett in free agency. Edge has become a desperate need, and I think Bulls would love that pocket pushing ability from Jared Verse in state. A very easy pick to make. Then we have the Cincinnati Bengals, where we traded down, and this pick is going to be a wide receiver, as we were talking about, and maybe not the wide receiver you expected, but it is going to be Ladd McConkey off the board. I really think Ladd gives them a piece that they don't really have. I love Jamar Chase, but he's not always the best against press coverage and getting open immediately from the slot. He's good at it, but I think Ladd brings an element there with that instant separation to be that early option on 3rd and short for Joe Burrow. They still have T. Higgins on the outside. They signed Mike Gesicki as that big slot option, but I think this is honestly an upgrade to Tyler Boyd, because you had kind of these 3 long, striding, bigger physical wide receivers. Now you get Ladd McConkey to give you a different flavor from the slot, and he can play outside when you want to play Jamar Chase from the slot. I love this fit schematically and value-wise. This is my wide receiver 5 in this draft, Ladd McConkey. Then we have Buffalo Bills at number 28. Honestly, they're starting to look more and more like the LA Chargers, where it's like, all right, well, you got this great quarterback, but then a million different needs elsewhere. So for me, it's like, you're drafting best player available, because every position's mostly a position of need. And just like the Chargers, we're going to take a defensive tackle. Jer'Jon Newton out of Illinois. Yes, you could go wide receiver, but they were active in free agency, right? They bring in Curtis Samuel. I actually quietly like the Mac Hollins edition. I think they set themselves up where if the board falls like this, where we've got 6 wide receivers off the board, they can wait till the second round. They don't have to force this. They can go best player available and help that pass rush, which, man, I think that pass rush was a bigger indictment on that team than the wide receiver weapons in Buffalo. I mean, they couldn't get after the quarterback. It was Ed Oliver, and their second best guy was Leonard Floyd, who cooled off as the year went on. But even he's gone, right? So Jer'Jon Newton is one of the more polished pass rushing interior players that you'll see. You put him next to Ed Oliver. They brought Daquan Jones back, who can still do a lot of the early down work, and you can put them all 3 out there at the same time. I think Newton and Oliver can both play, 3 tech, 4-eye, 5 tech, no problem. So little defensive help for McDermott there. And then the Detroit Lions up at number 29. I went Keon Coleman here. They've been a popular team to put a corner here in the first round, but I love the Carlton Davis edition. I think it's good enough that I don't think they necessarily need corner, especially in the first round, because now all of a sudden Sutton becomes your 2. Emmanuel Mosley back another year. Maybe you can get something from him. You got Branch as your slot corner. So I really don't think they have to go corner at all. It's not so much a need anymore after the Davis edition. But for me, some size at wide receiver, especially after really Josh Reynolds cost them a trip to the Super Bowl. I know we harp on Dan Campbell and his 2-point decisions, but man, if their big-bodied receiver who's supposed to be the reliable intermediate guy, and Josh Reynolds just catches the ball, they're going to the Super Bowl. So, and he's not even there anymore, Josh Reynolds. He's gone. So I'm looking for a massive upgrade in that role in Keon Coleman. And I know he ran a 4.62. The Lions have plenty of speed, right? That's not the problem. They got Williams. They got St. Brown, who's faster than his 40 time indicated, certainly plays faster. You got Jahmyr Gibbs. But Coleman's their type, right? He blocks his ass off. He's a Michigan guy. He played at Michigan State. This pick would be really annoying as a Packers fan, because I think he is the last piece of that offense, is that kind of big-bodied trust guy for Jared Goff. Also a guy that's really good with the ball in his hands, and I think Ben Johnson would find a way to kind of get him those easy touches. Nasty fit. Then we got the Ravens at number 30. So they've been linked to this guy, and I kind of like it. and that's Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. I guess they did like exclusive private workouts. I don't know if that was at his pro day or if they flew him out for that. But they've been really keyed in on this guy. They trade away Morgan Moses. All roads are pointing towards Jordan Morgan, which is annoying, going from Morgan Moses to Jordan Morgan. Going to get those guys mixed up a lot. But I actually don't think this is a reach. I like Jordan Morgan a lot. I actually have him above Tyler Guyton in my draft rankings. I think he's a more polished player. I think he's a good athlete. He was one of the only players that I saw, if not the only player, that was actually doing like, competitive, professional gamesmanship with Laiatu Latu, where he's, ghosting with his arms and mixing up his techniques and throwing Latu off his game. I really am impressed by Jordan Morgan. He can play guard, he can play tackle. Really think he's a good player. I think he's a first-round caliber guy, and the Ravens have to be in on tackle after what they've done. I just don't think you can count on Daniel Faalele right now, unless they truly love what they see from him in practice. But we've seen him play, and I just don't know that he's ready, man. But then we got the Niners up at pick 31. And I'm gonna go with Nate Wiggins. I really like Nate Wiggins, and if not for injury concerns, he'd probably be my number one corner. He reminds me a lot of Jair Alexander with his movement skills, the incredible speed, but also like that feisty competitive fire. He gets a lot of crap for his run defense, and I could see it. He's very slender. He struggles to get off blocks, but he might be the best cover corner in this draft, and if not for being a slender player that has gotten hurt, you are probably talking about a top 20 pick. So for the Niners to get that player and hope that he stays healthy, I think it's worth the risk at this point. It does remind me a lot of like Caleb Farley, though. Different type of injury, but a very talented player that, maybe injuries just catch up with him. I don't know. I'm not saying that's an outcome for him, but it is possible when you take a Nate Wiggins, and that's why he's falling in the draft. But if he hits for the Niners, you are getting another big impact player for that defense. But then at pick 32 to wrap up the first round, and then I'm going to give you two more picks at the top of the second round because I love you guys. But we're going to go Xavier Worthy here for Dallas. Definitely someone I would have had in consideration at 24. So to trade down and still get him is fantastic. Very self-explanatory as the fit, as the deep threat here, as you have CeeDee Lamb sucking up so much attention all over the field. Dak throws a nice deep ball. I'm hard on Dak, but he is, I would say, one of the 10 best deep ball throwers. He puts a lot of loft and accuracy on it. Maybe can't throw it 65, 70 yards, but he can throw it really accurately up to 55. And that's deep enough to utilize 4.21 speed. So many reasons to like this. He'll be in the mix in year one with Cooks and Tolbert. They cut Gallup. But I think especially long-term, as they're, you're going to have to pay Dak and pay Parsons and pay CeeDee Lamb, getting a cost-controlled rookie contract makes a ton of sense for this team. And then, as I mentioned, we're going to do a couple picks here in the second round. Carolina, got to include you guys. Big news, I just announced, Panthers fans, I am moving to Charlotte. My wife and I will be moving in July. So we are now Panthers fans. But we are going to go for my Carolina Panthers, Xavier Legette, the big-bodied wide receiver out of South Carolina. I think when you look at, how the board has fallen, a lot of receivers have gone. So I don't want to wait till that Giants pick, the 39th pick, to take one of these guys. I'm going to go offense now, and maybe we'll address corner or edge later. But if you look at the types of receivers they've added, right, you got Deontay Johnson in the mix now. Short to intermediate route runner. You have Adam Thielen, more of a short to intermediate type of weapon. Jonathan Mingo, it's like, man, you really were unimpressed by what he showed last year. If he can step up, that's great, but I'm not counting on that. I want a field stretcher for Bryce Young. And Xavier Worthy just went, but man, Xavier Legette is a really nice player, man. He's close to home as well, South Carolina, just down the road, right? But I think Legette gets too much crap. People say he's a bad route runner. I just so strongly disagree. I think he has really sharp cuts. I think he has one of the most valuable assets for a bigger wide receiver in that he's got the speed. He's a deep vertical threat, ran in the 4.3s at 220 something pounds. But he can really throttle down and stop on a dime as well. So I really think he's kind of the missing piece if you're looking for that complementary group of skill sets for these wide receivers. You've now got O-line, you've got weaponry. You're going to get to find out if Bryce Young can play ball this year and a good offensive coach. And then I'm going to include the 34th pick for the Patriots because I think it brings everything together. I would take Michael Penix if I were the Patriots here. Penix has become a little bit of the forgotten man in this draft class. I still don't love his pocket presence, and I really wouldn't want to play him year one until you really get that offensive line figured out. But I think I said this when I was talking about them taking Marvin at 3. I would prefer Penix plus Marvin Harrison than Jaden Daniels plus, who would you be taking here? Like, it'd probably be Ricky Pearsall, good player, but he's not Marvin Harrison, right? And I think Penix has a high enough upside where he's worth taking here at 34. And now with the 34th pick, not only have you pumped up the surrounding cast in a big, big way, you've given him Marvin Harrison to throw to, but there's so much less pressure to get that guy out right away, right? You take Jaden Daniels at 3, you're expected to be starting that guy over Jacoby Brissett. You just are. You take Michael Penix, you can sit him behind Jacoby Brissett. Now, I would still probably play him in the second half of the year after you've hopefully kind of sorted through the weeds a little bit and provided a more stable offensive line situation. But I do think it's kind of like Will Levis with the Titans, where you want to see him go out there, you want to see him play and see what he has so that you know if you have to take a quarterback. But this is also insurance if next year's quarterback class doesn't come to fruition. I am of the opinion that just like a Jaden Daniels rose through the ranks after being a projected 5th round pick heading into this season, I am of the opinion that someone will rise to the top and be as good, if not better, of a prospect as a Jaden Daniels. But if that doesn't happen, if this does happen to be that outlier 2022 draft, you can go another year with Michael Penix and see how things work out. So there's my explanation. I'm curious to see, Patriots fans, do you prefer Penix with Harrison, or would you rather go Daniels and Ricky Pearsall? I'm curious where you'd be at with that, or do you want a trade down situation? They're a tough team. Usually the 3rd overall pick is like very clear what you want to do. This year it's a lot harder. But anyway, that is going to do it. I am going to try and get a round 2 sort of published here in the comments within the next 24 hours. I'll tweet out when that's ready as well. But that is going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the pick I made for your team. Please do hit that like button as well. It really helps me out. And we will be back next week, back with positional rankings videos. We're going to do running backs next, and I think offensive tackles will follow them. But until then, have a great weekend. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you later. Peace out.